It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Tuesday, March 5th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that honestly was so emotional after the Jason Kelsey retirement that I think I was able to manage getting through this Flyers game okay.
Yeah, a lot happened in town, I'll say that.
Yeah.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. You can find us over on YouTube. We're also on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Busy times in Philadelphia sports, busy times in the Metro division as well. Around the Flyers, Lindy Ruff gets the axe in New Jersey. And in some ways, it feels like this was a long time coming. But then there was like this peaceful middle period where maybe they weren't going to do it. And now, ultimately, I feel like it's too late, right?
It feels too late. I mean, look, if they were to win something like 20 or 30, they could do something and make the playoffs, but it feels too late. Last year, they were going to fire him. The fans wanted him fired. And then, they started playing better. Jack Hughes saved his job. Okay. They went on a little run. But again, Fitzgerald, the GM, didn't do anything, didn't get any goaltending in the offseason, didn't get
Nope.
any defensemen. When defensemen went down, he brought up his young guys. That's fine, but they're all young. Still hasn't got Markstrom. There's still talk they might, but and they're saying, well, it's not so much for this year now; it's for next year. Well, what happened to this year? Like this year was supposed to be something. So I think fans, while they were maybe correct about Lindy at the time, like this time wasn't his fault. Like maybe if you would have done it last year, I could have gotten behind it. I can't get behind it now because they've got a lot of other problems.
Yeah, there is a lot going on with the New Jersey Devils. In the
Yes.
meantime, down in Washington for the Caps, Evgeny Kuznetsov came back from the player assistance program and was promptly put on waivers by the Caps, and cleared waivers and was assigned to the Bears. And in Hershey, I am not sure if that is going to happen, but it just it feels weird, but there has to be something to it.
I mean, his two choices are go to Hershey or go to Russia. Because right
Yep.
now nobody else in the league wants him. The Caps did the right thing by sending him
Hmm.
down because you can't just throw him on the team. Uh, I'm happy he's gotten help. That's fine. All of this started with that Instagram post that we all know about from like 2 years ago.
Hmm.
There have been guys like that down in the AHL before. Wade Redden with the Rangers was making more than, the whole team, but he kept playing. And so he actually used to take everybody out for dinner. Like that was his thing because he made all the money. Kuznetsov, if he wants to get back in the league, he's going to have to do that. If he
Yep.
doesn't, then he'll go back to the KHL.
Absolutely. Also, the trade deadline is approaching this Friday, as we know. And I think the longer we go without anything happening, the more the churn happens and the more rumors spin up. Because I think A, people are looking for content, and B, like there has to be something going on behind the scenes, right? If nothing's happening. But in the 32 Thoughts blog, Elliot Friedman seems to suggest a couple of things that I thought were a little left fieldish in terms of the Flyers potentially getting a goalie in the trade deadline moves, and that Toronto is keeping Martin Jones off waivers explicitly because of the Flyers.
Well, I don't know if it's explicitly because of the Flyers, but whatever. They need the goalie because they're definitely going to the playoffs. So that's one thing. I
Right.
don't know about the rest. The thing about the Sandstrom conundrum is this: whoever you're going to get, and this is my problem. I understand fans want to make the playoffs. Even if you get this backup goalie, he's going to play 2 games, maybe 3, the rest of the season. Is that going to cost you the season? May not. Probably not. Now you're going to give up an asset for this? You're supposed to be a rebuilding team. Now you're going to give up an asset for a goalie that you're going to have for as a rental. Like, it sends a mixed message, and I think they're better off going with Sandstrom. He had a good game last game. Now I know Tort says he gets another game. That's great, but he should just be the guy that stays up. Like, it should just be that way. I don't think they should get a goalie. I would be surprised, but I can't be shocked if they do it because they might. Now, the injury to Nick Seeler, because I think it's an injury, is going to change things a little. I don't think he was going anywhere anyhow. I don't. Now, here's the fly in the ointment thing. So if Sealer gets injured, then they could say, well, we had to keep Walker. We can't trade him, right? Okay. So then, but if you sign him the 4 or 5 year deal, you didn't have to do that either. So that's what I would come back with that. Drysdale presumably is coming back. He was at some signing at Oxford Valley Mall. Didn't have his sling on, but it doesn't mean he's not still hurting. He may just not want to have his sling on in public, right? So I don't jump to
Right.
conclusions for that. Risto, maybe he'll come back after, maybe he won't. Ronnie Adage still stapled to the bench. That's all I know, and I don't get it. That's my whole point.
Yeah, I think there are some questions here about what's going on with the defensemen, and yeah, and this Nick Seeler potential injury changes things, I think, pretty dramatically because if they're trying to like pit Walker and Seeler against each other from the Flyers' perspective and their agents in terms of who can give the Flyers the better deal,
Right.
moving forward, absolutely changes things if Seeler is hurt now. But I think especially based on what Elliot Friedman says in 32 Thoughts, that really the difference for the Walker side of things was term on a 4 or 5 year. Well, I don't think, and you don't think either, Russ, as you've said, that 4 or 5 years is a good deal to
It's
make
not
with
smart.
Walker.
No.
No, I think it's a 2, and you throw him a 3, as the reward good job done,
Yeah, I
right?
think 2, you really do it. Even if you paid him close to the 4 for 2, I could get it. But here's the scenario. So let's say Drysdale's healthy and you re-sign him. Well, then he's a top 4 guy. Then let's just say Zamula gets traded. Okay. So then you still have to do something with Risto. I don't think Risto is going to be easily traded unless they give up an asset again to get rid of him. So you still have him to deal with. Like, all of a sudden, and Stahl won't be there. I get it. But then all of a sudden, like, there's a chance, maybe one slot for like 3 defensemen in the next 2-3 years. And then we're not counting Bonk either. Because all these guys aren't going to be able to be magically traded every time you have a guy that's ready to be in the NHL. And sometimes you could, again, we brought this up. If you don't have a carrot for these young guys to follow, you sometimes don't get the best development out of them if they don't feel like they ever have a chance to make the team. And if you keep extending
Right.
guys 3, 4, 5 years, like, they're gonna, these young guys are gonna look at it like, where the hell's my chance?
Yeah, I think that is gonna be a big problem if they keep signing these guys. I think you're absolutely right. And again, not that there's anything wrong with them in the short term,
Short term.
because, yeah, like 1 to 2 more years
Yeah,
is the short term for this team based on where we are, based on the prospect pool, based on the Mitchkov timing. Like, you
right,
just don't wanna lock yourself down to too many people for more than the next 2 seasons because
right.
things are going to change dramatically at that point. And I think that you have to change your strategy. So I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens the rest of this week. And if any moves are made and if Nick Seeler is actually hurt in a significant way.
Right.
But this is a big deal. And I think that, for all the talk of them being forward thinking and thinking for the future, that needs to match. The
It does
actions
need
need
to
to
match.
match.
They need to show us and
Yeah.
fans and everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, everything could be fine. We don't know yet. We'll see. But
Right.
just just a little concerned based on what we've heard thus far. You did mention Ronnie Adder not getting out of the press box. Talking about Lixell in this game, where he got extremely limited ice time.
Yes.
Didn't have a chance to get out there in OT, which I thought might have been a good idea.
And I want to say this too. I would agree with that because Lixell in that situation is very dangerous. But how would they know if they don't use them? If you
Exactly.
notice, Brink didn't have a shot on goal. It's not that he didn't take any shots, but Brink now is trying to play that perfect game to satisfy the coach. And I've noticed that in the offensive zone, when he's sort of like missing a chance or it's not there, he's frustrated now. And this is
Yeah.
where, everybody's like, listen, we like this coach because it's accountability. Yes, but there's ways of doing accountability with younger players to still get the best out of them. And I don't think he did that the other day, and I don't think we're seeing it now.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about with Brink and all the other guys, and deployment was a huge issue in this game.
Yeah.
We are going to get into that coming up next. It is a very important point in the season, Flyers fans, and the team is in the thick of the playoff hunt. But regardless of where we are in the standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. Fans can also play daily fantasy NFL, NBA, MLB, and college football when they're in season on Sleeper, and entries can be made in under a minute. All you have to do is pick whether NHL superstars like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, or Austin Matthews, plus Flyers standouts like Tyson Forster, will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in any given game. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you have to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail those picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. On tomorrow's show, we will be answering your mailbag questions, so make sure you get them in. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, send us a message on Twitter, or comment on our YouTube channel. So this 2-1 shootout loss to the St. Louis Blues, I will say that, regarding, again, not putting Ronnie Attard in, not using Ollie Lixell in the overtime, not using Sean Couturier in the overtime, I think, that there were some definite deployment issues in this game.
Yeah, I was scratching my head. I didn't get it. It didn't work. I don't know what to say. I mean, I feel like there's still so much tinkering going on with this team, and it's like, at some point things have to, be at a gelling point. And I don't and special teams, other than the penalty kill, every other way, overtime, 6-on-5, power play. Those things, they're not gelling.
Yeah, I think it is a huge problem, and especially so they start the OT with Cates, Paling, and Sanheim, right? Which to me is a head scratcher, right? I'm not sure why
Yeah, I think
they were the
it's like, well, we got one fast guy, one guy who plays defense, and then the other one who's kind of good at everything, and he's got a long stride, so maybe that'll help. I
right.
beyond that, I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah. But then they get stuck out there for well over a minute,
Right.
right?
Because
And
that's been the biggest thing lately with overtime in this team is getting out coached, getting stuck out on the ice. That has happened to
right.
them.
Yes. And so they get stuck out there, right? And Earthen, God bless him, finally gets, the puck and covers it and gets
Right.
a stoppage of play. And then they put out Lawton, Forster, and York, which to me you put out a guy that is 100% going to win that faceoff.
Right.
If your guys just got stuck out there for a long shift, so your two choices are Frost and Couturier.
Right.
I don't care who else you put out with them, whatever makes sense to you.
No,
But
you're
you
right.
put Frost or Couturier out to win the faceoff. And then they didn't. They lost the faceoff. And now I do understand later in the overtime that, oh, when Frost was out there, they did have some possession, you know. And Owen Tippett did make that great move, but it misses. York hit the crossbar.
Right.
So, stuff happens, but I think that they could have had more momentum earlier in that OT and had a greater chance to win it if they had used the right strategy.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, all these points are important. Everybody likes to point that out. Well, deployment's important in overtime.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other big issue in this game was just general sloppiness. I think that
Yeah.
there was just a real lack of puck control at both ends of the ice, whether they were trying to clear the puck or they were trying to get quality chances out front. I know you famously like to say, I don't care about the shot totals. And this is a game where that point is exhibit A, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things where you want quality. You do. You want some quality. You want more. I mean, they did have some traffic around the net, but it wasn't consistent. Uh,
Hmm.
again, Ursan got a few posts. That's nice. He played a terrific game. But again, it's like, as the players, you would think that they would want to play a more shored up game for the goalie because he's played so many games already, like what did they say, 14 out of 17. And it's not going to get
Hmm.
any easier down the stretch. And it's not just see the thing is, and it's not just about keeping the area clean around the net, it's about breakouts and keeping the puck in the other end and actually having zone time. And those things didn't really happen.
Yeah, and you look at the heat map for this game, right? And you see a big giant red blob in front of Bennington. Well, we knew pretty much, end of first period, maybe you want to stretch it to midway through the second period, like halfway through the game. Bennington was just on one. This was one of his good games,
Yeah,
right? And so a tight goal like that isn't going to work against Bennington in this
right,
situation. You have to get him moving. When
right.
you get him moving, that's when he can mess up a little bit more. But when scrambling is happening in front of him, he's like between the Blues D and Bennington, they're gonna fail. They're gonna figure it out, right?
Right. No, it's true. I mean, they still have a competent defense, and
Mhm.
he is good when things are breaking down. You're right.
Yeah. So I think that that is like one of the big issues that they weren't, to your point, getting the puck out a little bit and then coming up with a good cycle to get different
Stay
looks and
behind the
different
net, stay
angles.
there for a few seconds, see who is cutting towards the net. I mean,
Yeah.
Farabee was trying to create. I give him credit.
Yep.
He was really
100%.
trying, but there's just not enough of it.
Yeah. And I think Frost was too, to some
Yeah.
degree, but
Yeah.
I do think that they just weren't adjusting, and this is like a continuous problem that the Flyers have had, and, I think that in this case, they just needed to maybe change it up a little bit, and it wasn't happening, and so I do think that's part of what led to this loss ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, I don't think the adjustments were great.
So the other part, I do wanna make sure we talk about Samerson a little bit more
Yeah.
because, he had such a tremendous game here, and, in the post game, Brian Boucher was very rightly, noticing that, Ersin has started to, like, play the puck a little bit more, and I've noticed that as well, that he's gaining confidence and that he's
Mhm.
becoming not just a, I'm figuring out being a number one goaltender. I'm figuring out how to be a more active member of this team and be
Right.
part of the breakout, being part of the offensive side of things as well. And I think that's important. It's an important part of his development. And it's a really good thing to see. And he's doing that at the same time that he's doing an excellent job as a goaltender, just a straight up goaltender too.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing a good job. There's no question. Uh, it's odd that he's under league average though, like as good a nights as he has, but there's some nights where it's just, the occasional nights that probably throw off his stats. But he is getting better playing the
Yeah.
puck. He is gaining more confidence. There's no question. But the teams, they've got to do more to really support him, because it's not so much that he's going to hang his head that they lost this game. It's just that, this is a winnable game that, like you said, maybe they didn't do everything in their power to actually win. And, even the Ottawa game, that game was still too close for comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, one of the issues that we mentioned, it was in terms of how they're deploying guys, how they're using some of the younger guys, and what the path to redemption is if you mess up in the Tortorella
Hmm.
system. And all of this, the injuries that have piled up a little bit, how they're using or not using the young guys is affecting the Phantoms drastically, and
Oh
that
yeah.
has led to a troublesome weekend for them as well this week, and we are going to talk about that coming up next.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts, for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league, including Locked On NHL. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe. Phantoms, another rough weekend. And, we talked about them having like too many guys at the beginning of the season, and now we're having the opposite problem. So, with Lixel up with the Flyers and Ronnie Attard in the press box, and Bobby Brink back up with the Flyers. It's
Hmm.
been rough for the Phantoms. And I think that they miss those guys, and I think some of the guys in Lehigh Valley are missing having some stronger line mates with them in order to have an impact, and they're trying to like spread them out throughout the different lines, which I think is maybe not the right way to go ultimately. But I think that this weekend it was abundantly clear that there was an issue. They scored one goal in 3 games.
Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, they had a lot of time, maybe like the last 2 months, to try and bank points, because you knew Flyers were going to be in a run like this. It's possible you're going to start losing guys, right? And
Hmm.
it just seems like they never saved any of those points for a rainy day. And now the rainy day is here, and they're just a mess. And I can't tell you how many people check in with me, Rachel, that ask me about Lehigh, and then they say, when we start talking, they're shocked that they don't run the same system as the Flyers. I can't tell you one person that thought that's a good idea. And the fact that, you put in your notes that Danny Briere and Keith Jones were there recently, I can't believe they're not going to force that and say, listen, we need this to be cohesive. Even if we don't get to the playoffs now, we need this to start next year. So let's start it now. I mean, you got to do it. I even went back and I sent somebody the original quotes when John was talking about, saying there's not that much difference, but there is a difference, because it's a mental difference. It's everything else.
Yeah.
It's like, here's the way I think about it. I know John says it's not that big a deal when they come up and to get used to this. But it does seem like it is, because otherwise he'd put him in right away. Why not make it seamless? You had the opportunity to make it seamless. You technically still have the opportunity to make it seamless. And if nothing else, I think we'd feel better about the Phantoms if they resembled the Flyers in some way, shape, or form, but they don't. And now they just seem adrift. They really do.
Yeah, and they lost to Bridgeport this weekend, who is the only team below them in the division. And that's rough. They got well outshot in that game to 41-29. They were outshot by Bridgeport, who is very bad. They are a very bad team. And then, had to go into a game on Sunday against Hershey, which, I do have to give them credit that they came out with a win, but it was a shootout win and nobody scored in regulation or in OT. So it was a 1-0 shootout win. No goals in that game. The PK did a good job. Wade Allison and J.R. Avon had, shootout goals, but again, super low event game. Shots were 18-15 overall, with only 4 shots on goal total between the two teams in the third period. So I think everybody was just tired, honestly.
Yeah.
But you can't play like that, right? And when you say they're adrift or they're lost, that's what we're talking about here. When you have a weakened Hershey team that's clearly not getting anything going, you got to be able to take advantage of that. And I don't care if it's your third team that weekend.
Right. Sitting Tuamala at all makes no sense. To me, you want to get this guy as many games as you can. And I see he didn't play one of them, right? And it's like, I don't know.
No, he
Did
did
he?
play all the games.
Oh, he did. I see. No, I see. I scrolled up. I missed that top line in the other one. Okay. But okay. So let's see. He played the third line, then he played the first line, and then he was back. So he played the first line 2 games, played the third line another game. It's like, I guess my basic question on that would be, why at all on the third line? What
Yeah,
would be the thinking?
and the reason why he was on the first line on Sunday is because Cooper Marody was out. He got hurt, and so
Okay.
he wasn't playing. And so the leading goal scorer for the Phantoms was out in the Sunday
Right.
game. So Tuamala gets bumped up. So that's what was going on there. But I think that it's Tuamala. We've talked about the fact that he struggled a little bit because potentially he's hit that wall of transitioning from a European season to a North American season, and he maxed out the number of effective games, and he's like learning how to push through it right now. But I think that at a certain point, like he's it, right?
Yeah.
It's him. It's occasionally J.R. Avon, but again, he's first season, like he's doing great considering
Doesn't Matt Brown
everything.
score goals? Isn't that his thing in
Yeah, I'm
Reading?
not entirely sure why he was out. He may be injured.
Okay.
Um,
So, all right,
but
let's say
because
he's injured. I'll leave.
Denoye's injured,
Right.
Lazinski's injured.
Okay, I'll leave that alone. How about this?
Yeah.
Mason Millman is setting scoring records in Reading. You trying to tell me he can't help the Phantoms at all?
Listen, we have talked about him
I know.
ad nauseum. So there's some weird decisions being made here, and I think that they could be doing a much better job managing this roster, and they also aren't managing the guys they're calling up to the Flyers very well overall. Maybe you give them credit on what they did with Brink, but
Sure.
I think that other than that, it's been spotty at best. And I think it's having a downstream effect. And
It is.
now we're seeing it where the Phantoms, if they make the playoffs, I would be shocked.
Me too.
Absolutely shocked.
Yeah, and this is a tough year because, you know, if I do an end of the year report card, how many young players am I going to say really developed in the Flyers situation this year with the Flyers and with Lehigh? It's not as high a number as we would want it to be. I think we all would agree on that.
Absolutely. Well, there's 3 games this week, another Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so 3 games in a row weekend. 2 of them are against Wilkes-Barre Scranton, 1 at home, 1 on the road, and then they
I mean,
face
if you want to make the
Bridgeport
playoffs,
again.
you got to sweep one of these weekends again. You got to have a
Yep,
chance.
yep. They gotta sweep this weekend, or I would say that's pretty much it. So hopefully they can do that. Hopefully we can see some goal scoring happen, get some offense going, and we can at least see some good development to, round out this season. That will do it for today's show. We will be back tomorrow. As a reminder, we have our mailbag on that show. So send us in your questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.